Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to understand a complex and historic issue, the ongoing war with Iran and the role played by former U.S. President Donald Trump. In early 2026, the United States, alongside Israel, launched a major military campaign against Iran's leadership and military infrastructure, a conflict that has quickly escalated into one of the most serious Middle Eastern crises in decades. Donald Trump's role in this conflict is unique and significant. He did not simply respond to the crisis, he directed a wide-ranging military strategy. From the outset, he outlined clear objectives for the U.S. campaign: degrading Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities, dismantling its navy, and halting Tehran's support for militant groups across the region. These goals were publicly stated as part of U.S. military planning. However, the situation has not stayed simple. Trump's approach to the conflict has shifted over time, reflecting competing pressures and changing realities on the ground. At moments, he has spoken about continuing the strikes until Iran makes significant concessions. At others, he has promised that the conflict will be short and decisive. One of the most controversial elements of Trump's involvement is that he has resisted limits on his authority from the U.S. Congress. In early March 2026, a resolution that would have required congressional approval before further escalation was rejected by the House of Representatives, effectively allowing Trump to continue the war without formal authorization. Internationally, Trump's strategy has also drawn mixed reactions, from requests that Israel pause certain attacks to avoid wider destruction, to concern from world leaders about rising civilian casualties and the economic impact on global oil markets. Finally, the human consequences of the fighting, including displacement, rising death tolls, civilian suffering, and regional instability, remind us that wars are not only about strategy, but about people. Iranians abroad, including political activists and former prisoners, have voiced fears that the conflict may strengthen the Iranian regime rather than weaken it, a perspective that challenges many of the war's stated goals. In conclusion, Donald Trump's role in the war with Iran has been that of the central decision-maker, shaping military strategy, defining objectives, and navigating political debates both at home and abroad. While the full consequences of this conflict are still unfolding, understanding his approach is essential to understanding the war itself. Donald Trump's involvement in the Iran conflict has been a defining factor in how the war has unfolded, making him the central figure in shaping both the strategic direction and political execution of military operations. From the onset, Trump positioned himself not merely as a reactive leader responding to crises, but as the primary architect of the U.S. military strategy. His approach combined public declarations, tactical decisions, and political maneuvering in ways that significantly influenced the course of the conflict. Trump's strategy was first evident in his public framing of the conflict. Unlike previous U.S. presidents, who often worked quietly through diplomatic channels or relied heavily on advisors, Trump frequently spoke directly to the public about the objectives and expected outcomes of military operations. He emphasized degrading Iran's missile and nuclear capabilities, dismantling its naval power, and curbing its support for proxy groups across the Middle East. By clearly outlining these goals, Trump not only shaped the perception of the war abroad, but also reinforced his image at home as a decisive leader willing to take bold action. This public framing was critical because it established the U.S. administration's priorities and sent a clear signal to allies and adversaries alike about the direction of U.S. policy in the region. A second key element of Trump's role has been his hands-on involvement in military planning. Reports indicate that he was deeply engaged in discussions regarding operational targets, the sequencing of airstrikes, and coordination with Israeli forces. Trump's insistence on having direct input in these decisions marked a departure from the more conventional approach in which presidents rely heavily on military advisors and the Joint Chiefs of Staff to set operational priorities. This level of involvement allowed Trump to shape not only the scale and intensity of the strikes, but also the timing and messaging around them, effectively steering the war in a direction aligned with his broader strategic and political objectives. Trump's political maneuvering further solidified his control over the campaign. In early 2026, the U.S. House of Representatives considered a resolution that would have restricted the president's ability to escalate military actions without congressional approval. Trump's administration actively opposed the resolution, framing it as a challenge to national security and executive authority. Ultimately, the resolution was rejected, effectively granting Trump unchecked authority to continue military operations. This move was significant because it demonstrated Trump's ability to use domestic politics to maintain operational freedom and reinforce his role as the principal decision-maker in the conflict. Another critical aspect of Trump's involvement has been his handling of international relations in the context of the war. He directly engaged with allies and adversaries, often issuing public statements that influenced the actions of Israel, Saudi Arabia, and European countries. For instance, he requested that Israel temporarily halt strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure to manage escalation risks, showing that his influence extended beyond the U.S. military to the broader geopolitical strategy. Trump's personal style, combining assertive public statements with behind-the-scenes negotiations, allowed him to control the narrative and maintain flexibility in responding to changing circumstances on the ground. Finally, the human and economic dimensions of the conflict reflect Trump's complex influence. While his stated objectives focused on military and strategic outcomes, the consequences of the war have included rising civilian casualties, displacement, and global economic disruptions. Trump's decision-making, particularly his prioritization of military objectives over diplomatic alternatives, has shaped these outcomes and will likely influence the region's stability for years to come. In summary, Donald Trump's role in the Iran war goes far beyond that of a typical executive responding to events. He has acted as the architect of U.S. military strategy, shaping both the operational and political aspects of the conflict. From setting strategic objectives and directing military operations to maneuvering politically and influencing international responses, Trump's involvement has been central to the way the war has evolved. Understanding his actions provides essential insight into both the current dynamics of the Iran conflict and the broader implications for U.S. foreign policy.